There are moments in life when everything feels heavy, even though nothing visible seems to be falling apart. The heart feels burdened, the mind feels tired, and emotions feel difficult to explain. You continue with your responsibilities. You smile when needed, but inside there is a quiet weight that does not seem to lift. In those moments, many people begin to question themselves. They wonder why they feel this way and whether feeling such pain means they are doing something wrong in their faith. Islam does not ignore this state of the heart. It does not dismiss emotional pain as weakness, nor does it shame a person for feeling overwhelmed. Allah, who created the heart, knows that it carries more than the body sometimes can. The Quran speaks to people who feel fear, grief, and deep emotional strain, reminding them that these feelings are part of being human, not signs of spiritual failure. When life feels heavy, Islam does not rush the heart or pressure it into pretending strength. Instead, it offers understanding. It teaches that hardship is not proof of distance from Allah, but often a moment where closeness is being shaped in a deeper way. Emotional pain is not meaningless in Islam. It is acknowledged, guided, and placed within a framework of mercy and purpose. Allah does not ask the hurting heart to explain itself perfectly. He asks it to turn to Him honestly. In that turning, the heart begins to feel seen rather than judged. Islam teaches that even when answers are unclear and relief feels distant, Allah's awareness of the struggle is constant. This is where guidance begins, not with denying pain, but with understanding it, not with guilt, but with compassion, and not with escape from hardship, but with learning how to carry the weight while remaining connected. Trusting that Allah is aware of every silent burden and every unspoken tear. Emotional pain is not an abnormal or shameful experience in Islam. It is a recognized part of the human journey. Human beings were created with depth, sensitivity, memory, and attachment. And wherever there is attachment, there is the possibility of loss, fear, and disappointment. Islam does not deny this reality or expect believers to be emotionally unaffected by life's challenges. The Quran addresses the human heart in all its states, including sadness, grief, anxiety, and inner heaviness, which confirms that emotional pain is a natural part of being human, not a flaw in faith. One of the most damaging misconceptions is the belief that a strong believer should never feel emotionally overwhelmed. This assumption creates guilt on top of pain, making the struggle heavier. Islam never teaches emotional invulnerability. Even those closest to Allah experienced moments of sorrow and emotional distress. Their experiences were not hidden or criticized, they were acknowledged and guided. This shows that emotional pain does not contradict belief. Rather, it exists alongside faith and becomes part of how faith is lived and tested. Islam treats emotional pain with dignity. It does not label it as weakness, disobedience, or failure. Instead, it frames it as part of life's trials, shaped by circumstances, relationships, and responsibilities. This framing is important because when pain is recognized rather than denied, it becomes manageable. Denial isolates the individual, while acknowledgement opens the door to reflection, healing, and support. Islam encourages honest engagement with one's inner state rather than emotional suppression. From a psychological perspective, recognizing emotional pain is the first step toward regulation and recovery. Islam aligns with this understanding by allowing space for sorrow without allowing it to define a person's worth or direction. The believer is not reduced to their pain, nor is their pain ignored. It is held within a broader framework of meaning, patience, and hope. When emotional pain is understood as a valid part of the human journey, the relationship with Allah becomes more sincere. A person no longer feels the need to perform strength or hide vulnerability. They can turn to Allah with honesty, expressing confusion, exhaustion, and sadness, trusting that being human does not distance them from divine care, but draws them closer through awareness and reliance. Islam approaches emotional pain with validation rather than blame. Instead of turning suffering into a source of guilt, it recognizes pain as an experience that deserves understanding and care. Many people, when they feel emotionally overwhelmed, begin to accuse themselves, believing that their sadness means they are ungrateful, weak, or distant from Allah. Islam corrects this harmful narrative by separating emotional experience from moral failure. Feeling pain is not a sin, and struggling internally is not evidence of poor faith. Guilt often deepens emotional pain by adding shame to an already heavy state. Islam removes this burden by acknowledging that the heart responds naturally to loss, pressure, disappointment, and uncertainty. The Quran addresses people who feel afraid, exhausted, and distressed without condemning them. This approach creates emotional safety, allowing individuals to face their pain honestly instead of hiding it out of fear of judgment. Validation in Islam does not mean encouraging despair or passivity. It means recognizing pain without allowing it to dominate identity or behavior. Islam teaches that emotions are signals, not verdicts. They indicate that the heart is under strain, not that the person has failed spiritually. This distinction is critical because when pain is understood rather than judged, it becomes possible to respond with patience, reflection, and constructive action. Psychologically, healing begins when a person feels understood rather than criticized. Islam aligns with this principle by offering compassion before expectation. It allows the believer to grieve, feel tired, and feel confused while still remaining within the circle of faith. This prevents emotional isolation and preserves dignity during vulnerable moments. By removing guilt and shame from emotional pain, Islam keeps the door to Allah open. A person who does not feel judged is more likely to turn toward Allah rather than away from Him. Honest prayer, sincere reflection, and gradual healing become possible when the heart is not burdened by self-blame. This compassionate framework ensures that emotional struggle does not push a believer into silence or despair, but becomes a space where guidance, patience, and trust can quietly grow within the heart. Islam reframes emotional pain by connecting it to purpose rather than meaninglessness. One of the most damaging thoughts during mental stress is the belief that suffering is pointless, random, or a sign of abandonment. Islam directly challenges this mindset by teaching that nothing a believer experiences is wasted, including emotional pain. Every strain on the heart carries potential for growth, awareness, and elevation when understood correctly. The Quran consistently reminds the human being that life is a test, not a reward center. Emotional pain, therefore, is not evidence that something has gone wrong, but that the test is unfolding. This perspective changes how the mind processes stress. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" the believer begins to ask, "What is this teaching me?" That shift alone reduces helplessness and restores a sense of control and meaning. Purpose does not mean that pain is always immediately understandable. Islam does not demand instant clarity or forced positivity. It allows uncertainty while anchoring the heart in trust. The believer is taught that some wisdom is visible now, while other wisdom becomes clear only with time or even in the hereafter. This protects the heart from despair when answers are delayed. From a psychological standpoint, meaning making is one of the strongest tools for resilience. People who believe their suffering has value are more likely to endure it without breaking. Islam provides this meaning through the concept of reward, purification, and closeness to Allah. Emotional pain becomes a means of softening the heart, increasing self-awareness, and deepening reliance on Allah rather than on unstable external sources. Islam also places emotional pain within a larger narrative of mercy. Hardship is not an end state, it is a passage. The Quran repeatedly pairs difficulty with ease, not as a slogan, but as a pattern of reality. This reassures the believer that pain has a lifespan, even when it feels endless in the moment. By framing emotional stress as purposeful, Islam prevents the heart from collapsing inward. Pain is no longer a dead end, it becomes a process. The believer learns that enduring emotional hardship with patience is not passive suffering, but active spiritual strength. This understanding transforms pain from something that weakens identity into something that quietly reshapes it, strengthens character, and redirects the heart toward what truly lasts. Islam teaches that healing the heart does not begin with silencing pain, but with turning toward Allah in the midst of it. When mental stress overwhelms a person, the natural instinct is often to escape the feeling or suppress it. Islam, however, offers a different approach by guiding the believer to acknowledge the pain while seeking refuge in a higher source of stability. This creates emotional grounding rather than denial. One of the most powerful tools Islam provides during emotional distress is remembrance of Allah. A dhikr is not presented as a quick fix, but as a gradual realignment of the heart. Repeated remembrance slows the racing mind, interrupts destructive thought loops, and reminds the believer that they are not alone in their struggle. The Quran emphasizes that hearts find calm through remembrance, highlighting a deep connection between spiritual focus and emotional regulation. Prayer also plays a central role in restoring emotional balance. Salah is not only an obligation, but a structured pause from chaos. It forces the individual to step away from their stress multiple times a day, to breathe, to reflect, and to place their burdens before Allah. This consistent rhythm helps stabilize the heart, especially during periods of intense mental pressure, by creating moments of intentional stillness. Islam further teaches that turning to Allah during pain is not a sign of weakness, but of awareness. Supplication is encouraged in moments of hardship, not after the pain disappears. The act of making dua allows the believer to express fear, sadness, and confusion without shame. It validates emotional struggle while reinforcing trust in divine wisdom and care. From a psychological perspective, this form of spiritual connection reduces isolation. Mental stress often convinces a person that they are carrying their burden alone. Islam counters this by reminding the believer that Allah is closer than they realize and fully aware of what weighs on the heart. This sense of divine presence provides comfort that external support alone cannot always offer. By directing emotional pain toward remembrance, prayer, and supplication, Islam transforms stress into a means of connection rather than disconnection. The heart is not left to battle silently, it is guided to lean on something unshakable. Over time, this reliance builds inner resilience, softens emotional intensity, and creates a calm that does not depend on circumstances but on a sustained relationship with Allah. Islam guides the heart under mental stress by restoring hope when the mind begins to believe that pain will never end. One of the most damaging effects of emotional pressure is the feeling of permanence, the belief that this heaviness defines who you are and what your future will be. Islam directly challenges this mindset by repeatedly reminding the believer that hardship is temporary and relief is promised. This is not motivational optimism. It is a principle grounded in revelation, teaching the heart to expect ease even while standing inside difficulty. The Quran reframes emotional pain as part of a meaningful process rather than a random punishment. Trials are described as tests that reveal sincerity, refine character, and elevate spiritual rank. When mental stress is viewed through this lens, it no longer feels pointless. The heart begins to understand that pain can coexist with purpose and that struggling does not mean failing. This shift in meaning is crucial for emotional endurance because the human mind copes better when suffering has context and direction. Islam also emphasizes patience, but not the passive kind that suppresses emotion. Sabr in Islam includes endurance, restraint, and continued effort despite internal turmoil. It allows space for sadness while preventing despair from taking control. The believer is not told to pretend they are strong. They are taught how to remain steady while feeling weak. This realistic approach prevents guilt from being added to pain, which is common when people feel they should be better, but are not. Hope in Islam is anchored in Allah's attributes of mercy, wisdom, and justice. Even when answers are delayed, the heart is trained to trust that nothing endured is wasted. Mental stress often convinces a person that their pain is unseen or insignificant. Islam directly refutes this by teaching that every tear, every silent struggle, and every moment of emotional resistance is known and recorded. This awareness alone can ease internal pressure by removing the fear of being forgotten. Another critical aspect is the understanding that healing is not always immediate and that faith does not eliminate struggle overnight. Islam normalizes gradual recovery and fluctuating emotional states. This prevents unrealistic expectations that often lead to disappointment and self-blame. Instead of demanding instant peace, the heart is guided to take steady steps toward it, supported by trust rather than urgency. Through hope, patience, and trust in divine wisdom, Islam protects the heart from collapsing under mental stress by teaching it how to endure without losing direction, how to suffer without losing faith, and how to wait without losing hope. This reminder touched your heart. Share it with someone who needs it and stay connected for more guidance and peace through faith.